Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in on something special for you. A real piece of RC history. The Tamiya Grasshopper and the Grasshopper II buggies.
Yeah, classic stuff. And you've pulled together some great sources looking at that common issue people talk about, the slop in the rear axle, that unwanted play.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack what that really means, why it happens, and maybe most importantly, all the different ways owners try to fix it.
Right. Or maybe don't fix it. It's kind of about understanding these buggies, quirks, and all. Do you tune them up or just, well, embrace the character?
That's the question. Okay, so let's dive in. When we say slop with these models, what are we actually talking about?
Fundamentally, it's just unwanted movement. Simple as that. The sources break it down for the rear end mainly into a few types. You've got rotational slop,
Okay.
which is basically play in the drivetrain itself. Like you turn a wheel, and there's that tiny delay before the gears bite. That's it. Looseness in the gearbox.
Gotcha. Drivetrain delay, what else?
Then there's lateral slop. That's your side-to-side wobble, usually right at the wheels on the axles, makes the wheels kind of wiggle.
Right, the wobbly wheel thing.
And the big one, especially for the original Grasshopper, is vertical slop. People call it axle slap or just gearbox movement. The whole gearbox assembly moves up and down.
And thwacks against the chassis, right? You can hear that.
Exactly. Especially when you accelerate or brake hard.
Yeah.
It's pretty distinctive.
So why? Is it just parts wearing out over time?
Wear is definitely a big part of it. Those original plastic bushings, or sometimes bronze ones, they wear down. Creates gaps. Sometimes they even wear little steps into the axles themselves.
Wow, into the metal.
Yeah. And gears wear, too, adding backlash. But, it's also just baked into the design. Plastic parts, simple construction. The tolerances weren't super tight to begin with, and they loosen up. Pivot points get sloppy.
So what does this all actually mean when you're driving the buggy? Does it handle badly?
Well, yeah, it impacts handling. Things feel less precise. Steering can be vague. It might feel kind of bouncy or unpredictable, especially on rough ground.
Yeah.
That rotational slop means the power delivery isn't as instant. And all that movement just accelerates wear on everything else. Plus, it makes the buggy more likely to diff out, one wheel spinning freely when it loses traction.
Right, less control, more noise, things wear out faster. Got it. Now, the sources make a point about the difference between the original Grasshopper and the GH2's rear end. How does that change things?
Yeah, that's crucial. The original Grasshopper, the GH1, has this fixed pivot design. The gearbox basically just hinges up and down on points molded right into the chassis tub.
Pretty simple.
Very. So the slop there is mostly at those hinge points and inside the gearbox itself.
Yeah.
That directly leads to the famous axle slap we mentioned. Tamiya did apparently tweak those points a bit later on, but the basic design is fixed.
And the Grasshopper II is different.
Totally. The GH2, and the Hornet is similar, uses a sprung pivoting system. The gearbox pivots on a longer shaft, and it's cushioned by springs. Gives it more suspension travel, more articulation.
Sounds better, but
the trade-off is that extra freedom can lead to what people call gearbox flop if it's not controlled. The whole rear end can kind of bounce or shift around more than you want.
Okay, so GH1, fixed pivot, prone to vertical slap. GH2, floating pivot, prone to flop. Different issues. So where do the sources suggest starting to fix this?
Almost universally, the biggest bang for your buck is replacing the stock bushings with ball bearings. That's step one.
Okay, bearings, specific sizes.
Usually, yeah. Typically, you need one small 5x8 millimeter bearing and then 9 of the larger 5x11 millimeter ones for the wheels and inside the gearbox. Bearings are much tighter, smoother, and don't wear down like plastic.
Makes sense. But what if the axles themselves are worn down?
Good point. If the axles have those wear steps we talked about, new bearings might still be loose. You might need to replace the axles, too, to get a proper fit.
Right. Bearings first? What about shimming? That came up a lot.
Shimming. Yeah, that's the meticulous DIY fix. Using really thin washers like 5mm inside diameter ones for the wheel axles, maybe 10mm ID for the differential outdrives inside the gearbox, 3mm ID for pivot points.
You basically slot them in to take up the gaps.
Exactly. You carefully add just enough shim to remove the free play, but not so much that things start to bind up. It takes patience, but it's super effective and cheap.
So bearings, then careful shimming, any other basic stuff?
Yeah, just good gearbox maintenance, clean it out, use proper grease, maybe ceramic grease on the gears, some thicker stuff like anti-wear grease on the diff gears.
And the diff itself, I saw notes about stiffening it.
Right, you can pack the differential gears with really thick grease, or some people even use bits of foam earplug material. It makes the diff action much stiffer, almost locking it.
How does that help slop?
It forces both wheels to drive more equally. which improves traction and kind of masks the feeling of slop because the power delivery is more solid, less one-wheel spinning. Oh, and some people use a tiny drop of CA glue, super glue, to build up worn plastic pivot holes, or wrap Teflon tape around pivots for a temporary fix.
Lots of little tricks. What about going beyond DIY? Aftermarket parts.
Yeah, if you want to spend a bit more, Tamiya's own CVA oil-filled shocks are a huge upgrade over the standard friction dampers, especially for controlling the GH2 Hornet bounce.
Better damping.
Much better. You can even get Tamiya parts to convert a GH1 to the Hornet's pivoting rear end, but that's a bigger change, really alters the buggy's character. And a faster motor, like the Sport Tuned, makes any slop way more obvious because there's more force involved.
Okay, and third-party stuff. Braces and aluminum bits.
Oh yeah, the community's gotten really creative there. Especially for the GH2 and Hornet, you see lots of 3D printed gearbox braces. Companies like Ampro Engineering or sellers on sites like World Outprints make these parts, often designed to just snap on, specifically to stop that vertical gearbox flop.
So they stiffen the connection between the gearbox and chassis.
Precisely. And then you have machined aluminum parts, axle stays, gearbox mounts, chassis plates from brands like Hobby Corky, Eagle Racing, 2Mod. These replaced key plastic parts for much more rigidity and a more secure mounting. Less flex, less unwanted movement.
So you can really start replacing plastic with metal if you want ultimate rigidity. Are there even more extreme options?
Well, yeah, you get into serious modifications.
Mhm.
Like we mentioned, converting a GH1 to the GH2 Hornet pivot system is one thing. Then you have things like Ampro's Superfly conversion.
That's that.
It's basically a full custom independent rear suspension setup using mostly 3D printed parts. Completely re-engineers the rear end. It's a whole different level, not just fixing slop, but creating a modern suspension for a vintage buggy.
Wow. But hang on, you don't have to do any of this, do you?
Absolutely not. And that's a key point in the sources. Plenty of owners go for the do-nothing approach.
Huh?
They love the buggy exactly as it is, slop, bounce, slap, and all. It's part of the nostalgia, part of the charm.
Especially with the original, slower motor, maybe it's less of an issue.
For sure. It's less noticeable, and for many, the fun is just running it stock, experiencing it as it was designed back in the day.
Which brings up that core question.
Hmm.
How much do you want to change the basic nature of a classic just to chase performance?
That's the fundamental trade-off, isn't it? Performance versus authenticity or charm.
So, yeah, whether you're reaching for tiny shims, bolting on machined aluminum, or just letting it bounce, there are clearly loads of ways to approach the hop and slop in these iconic Tamiyas.
It really boils down to what you, the owner, want from the experience. Peak performance, a trip down memory lane, something in between.
And here's where it gets really interesting, thinking beyond just RC cars. This whole process, identifying looseness, understanding why it's happening, figuring out how to tighten things up.
Yeah, how does grappling with play or tolerance in this simple physical system, this little buggy, how does that maybe help us think about slop in much more complex systems we deal with every day?
Right. Whether it's, inefficiencies in a workflow, communication gaps in a team, or even just wiggle room in plans. Unwanted play crops up everywhere, causing unpredictability and inefficiency. It's kind of a universal challenge, just made really clear and physical in a model car. Something to chew on.